Roman gladiators often became celebrities and even endorsed products. Children would even play with gladiator action figures, made out of clay. Also, their sweat was considered an aphrodisiac and women would mix it into their skincare products. The Pastry War. My go-to Cold War story, which isn't terribly well known. Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian at all. She was Macedonian. She was a descendant of Ptolemy, one of Alexander's generals. And their whole family was so against mixing with regular Egyptians that they intermarried with each other to avoid it. She was the last of her line and the very first to even learn to speak Egyptian. That I pretty much single-handedly saved all organic life in the galaxy from the Reapers. The Toba Eruption ~75000 years ago brought humans to the brink of extinction. Like there was less than 10,000 surviving humans maximum. It's theorized this is one of the main causes of so many genetic disorders humans have. There's a 200-year-old elm tree in NYC. Little Dominican Republic. In 1776 during American Revolution, George Washington used that nearby mansion, Jumel Mansion, as headquarters during the American Revolution. Not too far away, on 163rd Street and St. Nicholas, the elm tree was planted and it's thicker than a Snickers. You'll typically see Dominican old men hugging around the tree. It provides oxygen and shade while they give it carbon dioxide. Caesar salad wasn't invented in Italy. It was invented in a hotel called Hotel Caesar, in Mexico. The German Wall fell 1989. Because one politician said a wrong fact in an official interview. In a public interview on TV in the DDR was announced that people would be allowed to leave the DDR, but wouldn't be allowed to come back. When an interviewer asked when this is official, the politician said, "As far as I know. Effective immediately without delay." The Confederacy built the first submarine to ever sink a warship. Yes. The Confederacy. Napoleon wasn't French, Hitler wasn't German, and Stalin wasn't Russian. The Soviet Union applied for admission to NATO in 1954. It wasn't a sincere attempt to join the treaty, but a political move intended to expose NATO as anti-Soviet American manipulation of Western Europe, rather than the peaceful alliance system it was purported to be. The Gresford mine disaster from 1934, 266 miners killed in an explosion and collapse underground. The poem about Paul Revere's ride, from which we get our popular lore about him, is basically 75% bullshit. He was a real person, and did attempt a warning ride, but not in the way portrayed. He also never completed his mission before he was captured by the British. The major raids on all black cities in the U.S. There are a lot of them. Mammoths were still around in the time of old Egyptians. During World War II, a lot of soldiers who died were labeled as missing because the explosives left nothing but red mist because there were no bodies to ID them. They're still considered missing to this day. There are so many. There's so much we don't know. The Korean War emo. Yes, it's bigger than most, but not a lot of people know the story of the two Koreas and why North Korea is the way that it is. The Derd Martinovich incident. Which you're going to have to look it up, because if I were to actually describe it here, people would probably just call it bullshit from the get-go due to how genuinely stupidly funny, sad and ridiculous it is. Theodore Roosevelt's South African hunting guide was a spy for Germany during both World Wars. Joseph Wilson Swan made the idea of the light bulb, not Thomas Edison. Watergate is apparently a must-mention in American schools. But I have never heard any teacher talk about COINTELPRO. Sweden didn't adopt the feudal system. Adolf Hitler was missing a testicle. General William Tecumseh Sherman was a racist. He didn't like black PPL. He said they were inferior. General Sherman was by definition a loser in life, failed banker, failed businessman. General Grant had to beg him to come back to military service. General Sheeman broke the back of the Confederacy in Georgia. He didn't care about public opinion. Very little is told in history books of how Sherman's troops just destroyed the state of Georgia. When Sherman rode into a Garogia town, he was confronted by a group of angry Southern women and he let them have. He told them in no kind words, "You deserve what you get." He didn't say "I'm sorry for burning down the state and his troops looting and pillaging the towns." So if you're in Georgia, General Sherman is regarded as a terrorist here in the North. When you speak of General Sherman, he's praised as a hero of the North. No one cared that he set the state on fire. Major Taylor winning the 1899 ICA Track Cycling World Championships. It was pretty much a gentleman's way for a black man to say, "Fuck you" right back, when faced with racist bullying at his time. The second bomb that hit Hiroshima did more damage. During World War II, many of the people who died were labeled as missing because the explosives that were used left nothing but red mist because there were no bodies to ID them on. They're still considered missing to this day. The Goldsboro Ncb 52 crash. The plane disintegrated carrying 2 nuclear bombs that somehow didn't go off. Big part of NC would have been destroyed at the early 50s, height of the Cold War. And who knows what would have happened after the incident if the bombs had blown up. The Radium Girls. Garbo the Spy. WW2 spy that got the Iron Cross and the Most Excellent Order of the British Order. YTER called Wendigoon has a good video about it. The first electric car was from Greece. That the Silver Maiden isn't real. You might have heard of one of the Silver Maidens before. Then are in the shape of a huge box or Russian doll and have long spikes on the inside around all the walls. So when you'd close the door, the person inside it would suffer an excruciating death. False. These things were never used. It was only made for rich people in 1900 to show off how barbaric their ancestors were. Don't get me wrong. They were super barbaric. But they never actually used the Silver Maiden. That in its earliest days, the Republican Party was so far to the left that it was called socialist. The charge of the Winged Hussars in 1683. The Great Tulip Stock Market Pump. The War of the Bucket in Italy, or the Emu War in Germany. It isn't widely known as I experienced. There was a civil war in China around the mid-1800s where a guy convinced people he was the brother of Jesus Christ. He led a rebellion against the Qing dynasty. The first video recording is of Pontius Pilate shitting himself. The Cod Wars between Iceland and the United Kingdom in the 50s to 60s. There were 3 Cod Wars which basically went as this.